our first meeting of the Scary Movie Club / Movie Club. We are here at the Edmond Historical Society, and we are doing 1950s movies because our decades exhibit this year, which you can see behind me, is called Back to the 1950s. My name is Anna. I am the Director of Education here at the museum. We are going to share our name, who we are, what we do, and let's do this time our favorite movie monster. So we'll do a different fun fact about our panelists each week. Now I need to come up with what my favorite Universal movie monster is. It's probably the Mummy. Yeah, I think it's the Mummy. We'll go with that. All right, let's go to David and Clay.
Hi, my name is David, and I work in a lab as a lab tech. I'd probably want to say maybe my favorite monster movie. Probably Frankenstein. Yeah. So, I like the older, like, 30s, 40s of, Frankenstein. Just, always been fascinated by that. It just, it's always been good.
Yeah,
like yeah,
that's a good one.
Yeah.
Well, hello, I'm Clay. I work at a North Kelly Lowe's, work in their plumbing department, and I would probably have to say that my favorite monster of all time. I mean, it's probably Godzilla.
Good one.
Of course, I've watched every single Godzilla movie in existence, so I have to say that's my favorite.
That is a good one. All right, Barrett.
Hey, how's everybody's October day? My name is Barrett Huddleston. I grew up in the Oklahoma City metro area. One of my projects that I'm most proud of right now is I own a business that does humanities and arts-based education for K through 12 students called Finer Arts. My favorite movie monster of all time is probably the killer clowns from outer space. But my favorite Universal movie monster is the Bride of Frankenstein.
Oh, there you go.
Good. That's great. If I ask or if I mute anyone in this part, it's just because we're getting feedback. It's not anything like personal. Obviously, I'm not going to mute you because I don't like what you're saying. So, okay. So I'm going to start with I'm going to share my screen and I'm going to show a trailer of the 1956 Invasion of the Body Snatchers. So give me one moment. Share. All right, here we go. Okay.
But will you tell these fools I'm not crazy? Make them listen to me before it's too late! Listen to me. Please listen. If you don't, if you won't, if you fail to understand, then the same incredible terror that's menacing me will strike at you!
No, you've got to get out of here, please!
They come from another world, spawned in the light years of space, unleashed to take over the bodies and souls of the people of our planet, bringing a new dimension in terror to the giant super scope screen.
It's whatever intelligence or instinct it is that can govern the forming of human flesh and blood out of thin air is fantastically powerful, beyond any comprehension.
A cursed, dreadful, malevolent thing was happening to those he loved.
This isn't just an ordinary body, is it?
I never saw one like it. It looks unused.
The sensational star discovery of The View from Pompey's Head. And now an undreamed of horror makes her life and love a vortex of fear.
Jack!
Miles, where do they come from?
I don't know.
Suddenly, while you're asleep, they'll absorb your minds, your memories.
I don't want any part of it.
You're forgetting something, Miles.
What's that?
You have no choice.
From city to city, an incredible hysterical panic spreads as the unimaginable becomes real, the impossible becomes true.
Stop and listen! Stop and listen to me! Listen! Listen! Listen to me! They're not human! Can't you see? Everyone! They're here already! You're next!
All right, I actually don't know that I need to do a synopsis because that pretty much was the movie. So there you go. I will still talk a little bit about it. So sorry. Oh my gosh, I'm like trapped in YouTube. Hold on. Stop it. Stop YouTube. Okay, there we go. I'm just closing all my tabs.
Dr. Squatch ad is going to appear any minute.
Oh,
like
yeah.
A purple mattress ad in
Yes.
place of Anna. Yeah.
I'm like, what is happening in my headphones? Okay, so Invasion of the Body Snatchers is a 1956 American science fiction horror film produced by Walter Wagner, directed by Don Siegel, that stars Kevin McCarthy and Dana Winter. The black and white film, shot in Superscope, was partially done in a film noir style. Daniel Mainwaring adapted the screenplay from Jack Finney's 1954.
Partially?
Partial. I know. That's what YouTube said. Or,
That's like saying that John Merrick had a little puffiness under his eyes.
The 1954 novel, The Body Snatchers. I did not know this. The film was released as a double feature with The Atomic Man. So, everyone saw the plot. It's that there are alien plant spores that have fallen from space, grow into large seed pods, each one capable of reproducing a duplicate replacement copy of each human. The slang pod people that arose in the late 20th century American culture references the emotionalist duplicates. This movie is in the National Film Registry by the Library of Congress for being culturally, historically, or aesthetically significant. So I'm not going to read the whole synopsis, but because I think the trailer pretty much did it. We were talking beforehand, so the movie itself, you don't really learn that the pod people are aliens until much later in the movie, but I guess it was just in the trailer, so they didn't have to introduce it earlier. So
right.
So from the panelists, what were kind of your first thoughts with this movie?
Well, absolutely. I found it fascinating that we didn't get the alien reveal until a little bit later. And for those folks out there who aren't aficionados of 1950s science fiction horror, really 1953 and 1954 are the watershed for horror films in Western civilization because of Godzilla, right?
Yes.
You take a conventional monster like a dragon, but instead of making him a product of folklore, you now make him a product of science as a way to talk about contemporary events. Japan didn't really have a way to talk about the atomic bomb until Godzilla came along. And Invasion of the Body Snatchers is very much in that same vein, right? Of course, there have been demon possession stories throughout history, but this is a different kind of possession, and it's possession that's based upon science, science fiction, and UFOs, rather than conventional tropes.
Yeah, it was very of its time. A lot of kind of very 50s fears, which we'll talk about towards the end of this, but definitely. One thing that I thought was kind of interesting and maybe humorous was the mass delusion storyline. So a big part of the movie is, or at least in my view, was everyone in the town people are starting to be convinced that their significant others are not who they say they are, and the psychiatrist is like, oh, it's just a mass delusion. And I'm like, man, how often does that happen? Like, was that like a real fear, or was it because the psychiatrist was already a pod person? I don't know. I wasn't sure.
It's called Capgras.
Yeah.
Something like Capgras delusion.
Delusion, where
Basically, you wake up and you think the person across from the breakfast table is not really your spouse.
yeah, but I was like, it seems like a lot of people to be having this this delusion.
So I think that phrase "mass delusion" was not necessarily a dog whistle, but would have been a loaded word, right?
Yes.
Because it's during this period that the works of Sigmund Freud are starting to be widely translated into English, because he immigrated to London in 1939. And he describes things like religion and ideology and things like that as a mass delusion. So it's a really loaded term. And I think it's telling that the psychiatrist is the one that uses that phrase.
Yes.
Right?
Oh, definitely. Another thing that I kept noticing was just how quickly people jumped to conclusions in this movie. It was like the doctor was like, "Oh, there's a little spot of blood on this table. Somebody was murdered," and I was like, "What?"
Yeah. Oh yeah. Like he easily put an ice pick into the back of his head, and
yes.
there's the blood.
And then that leads to the blood. I was like, these are leaps. And then later the cop has a dead body, and it's like, oh, you all saw this dead body earlier. Okay, bye. I'm like, you're not gonna like talk.
Right. Well, everything moves fast in this movie,
yes.
right?
It is a tight 80 minutes, so they gotta.
The little boy goes from accusing his father of being an alien to being just fine the next day, and
yeah,
you got these folks that haven't seen each other in 5 years, and bam, it's like they just swipe right.
Yeah,
in one day.
they are ready.
Yeah.
As soon as Becky, she walked in, I was like, oh, there's the love interest.
Yeah. Did anybody notice so does anybody know what the male gaze is? We know what it is. Okay, it means today that like you show a woman from a man's perspective, which means you objectify her. But literally in the 1950s, there was a trope, especially in Humphrey Bogart movies, where you couldn't have the actress be shorter than their male lead.
Oh.
So if you notice in the doctor's office, Kevin McCarthy and Dana Winter, they're about the same height, but as soon as they walk out of that office and you can't see their shoes anymore, he is wearing lifts, baby. He has got a good 2 or 3 inches on her. He's always 2 or 3 steps behind her when we're on that staircase. Like, he's taller than her. Like, he's wearing lifts the entire time.
Wow.
Yeah. And every time after that, like, he's always below the hill on her or above the hill on her, so you can never compare their height. Like, they're always ducking down together, so you can't tell that Kevin McCarthy is a card-carrying member of the Lollipop Guild. It is so wonderful to see that unabashed a level of male gaze in a film.
Yes.
I loved it.
Oh man, I didn't notice that, and I usually like can notice when they're tricking the eye, but that's.
I'm a bit of a shoddy myself, so.
Yeah. So you notice. So David and Clay, what are some of the things that you struck out to you about this movie?
Oh man, what would you say? Maybe it was the fact that like most of the guys were always not really like directly berating their wives if anything was like going awry or anything.
Yeah, I did, didn't I? I'm like, I think it's like the the Northern Lights or something back there,
Just crazy magical.
Yeah.
But like if anything were to go wrong, it kind of seemed like they were not necessarily belittling them most of the time, but it was kind of like, you know, it's a woman thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, just
Yeah.
typical.
Take
Typical
some
ladies.
thalidomide and go to bed, sweetie. Leave
Yeah.
it.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And my goodness, like they've been gone from each other for 5 years, and like she's cooking for him. She's like literally barefoot in the kitchen for him in 36 hours. Like,
They clearly had broken up for a reason, but still they're
so
like,
I mean,
no, we're good. We're gonna.
So there's obviously, because we know that from the late 1940s on, people are returning from World War II. And in places like Oklahoma, it was like there was 1 male to every 4 to 6 females.
Mm-hmm.
But in places like Brooklyn, New York, it was like 1 male to every 96 females. So like there was competition out there, which is why she's got like a 12-inch waist and nuclear missiles strapped in front of her dress. And like, and her fingers are made out of porcelain or whatever they're doing there. Yeah.
Oh man.
It was real fine china.
Yeah. And they've both been to Reno too, right?
Yeah, going to Reno. There you go.
Yeah.
I think the other thing that I kind of noticed, it almost kind of seemed like it wanted to be more of Alfred Hitchcock. Like you try to see a close up of the face of them with the eyes.
Oh my God, the scores for the movie.
But that to me, it was kind of seemed like more of like, okay,
they're
I want to be more like Alfred Hitchcock. And
yeah, so this was shot in 19 days, 6 days a week.
Wow.
Yeah. So
on like a budget of $350,000, something like that, which I'm sure for back then was good money for a B movie. Studio actor, but lots of very, very few, like according to Hoyle, noir shots.
Yeah,
mostly it's just close-ups, and then you can hear the ADR off stage. Like the noir shots we got were great, right? The the Dutch angle in the hothouse.
Yeah,
it was like straight out of Batman. I was convinced the Joker Catwoman was gonna pop out of that pod. And then you even had like the music for this was done by a student of Nelson Riddle who did Batman in the 1960s.
Oh wow!
So, yeah. And Nelson Riddle like had a top 40 hit in 1956. 2 top songs in 1956 were both by Elvis, and then after that it was like something by Nelson Riddle. So all that stuff was in the zeitgeist, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah. That was pretty crazy. That was just funny, you know, like Alfred Hitchcock.
But also some of the quotes, the tropes of Art Deco and noir, right? Like you have your manly man, you've got your hysteric female, you've got your femme fatale, you've got, bumbling cops.
Exactly.
You got your
except the bad guy is a pod person instead of a fat dude with a Maltese Falcon.
Yeah, we were talking, the 19 days really puts that in perspective. So the scene that was in the trailer where Kevin McCarthy is running through all the cars and looks very stressed out. And I read somewhere that the director, everyone was very nervous for him during the car scene, especially. Like the director told the stunt drivers, like, be really careful because I'm afraid he's gonna trip, because he had to run for like hours.
So Kevin McCarthy was like he was a founding member of the Actors Studio. So he believes strongly in method acting. So he's marathon manning it, right? Like if the part says that you've stayed up for 36 hours, then he's gonna stay up for 36 hours. And he looks like he's stayed up for 36 hours.
He really does, like A+ there.
And in his close-up scene, you know, when he's running through, it was
all
right, cut. Let's spray water on him, and it didn't, you know, wasn't, you know, like going down his face. it was just beaded right there, you know.
Yes,
So it
it's
just,
just right
It's
there.
like the anti-Jimmy Stewart from It's a Wonderful Life. Instead of running through the streets and going, goodbye, Merry Christmas, Merry Christmas, he's going, ah, the Reds are coming, the Reds are coming, the Reds are coming.
I think that is a good opportunity, if the panelists are okay, I think, to open it up to the wider discussion, because your comment about the Reds. So the question that I'm going to open this discussion up to is a question on the allegory in this movie. So the film is often viewed as an allegory, despite the fact that the filmmaker, the writer of the original story, and of the screenplay all say that it was not intended, but you know how that is. But it's still viewed from that lens. It can be argued that it's an allegory where the pod people represent communism, or an allegory where the pod people represent McCarthyism. So if you watch the movie, or even just from our discussion, if you have an opinion on what camp you fall under, if you think it's McCarthyism or if it's communism. Barrett, we'll start with you because I saw your hand
So
up.
I grew up being told this was an anti-McCarthyism movie, but having rewatched it, no.
No,
This to me seems definitively Red Scare.
Yes.
And there's a couple of definitive reasons for that, for me.
Yeah.
Number one is the good guy is medical, but he's also the victim. And we know that the Red Scare, McCarthyism in the mid-1950s, there was a huge anti-medical movement within the Red Scare. People like Joseph McCarthy were against the polio vaccine, they were against fluoridated water, and they were against what they called mental wellness. And the fact that the doctor is the victim in this scenario, that makes a lot of sense to me. Also, just the way that they describe the pod people as having no nationality and having no country of their own, that definitely seems more anti-communist to me than McCarthyism. And the fact that Kevin McCarthy and Don Siegel themselves were kind of loath to ascribe meaning to it, because Kevin McCarthy was one of the few members of the Actors Studio that wasn't blacklisted in the 1950s. And, you know, Don Siegel ended up making movies like Escape from Alcatraz and The Shootist and things like that. These kind of old-fashioned movies with old Hollywood actors like Clint Eastwood and John Wayne. So I think there was some reticence on the part of either Siegel or McCarthy to come out and say, yeah, we're making fun of the Red Scare.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, I agree.
Anyone want to argue for McCarthyism, or that it's viewed as an allegory for McCarthyism? I think I'm also in the communism camp, but
I found it fascinating because I would have sworn on a stack of Gideon Bibles that Eugene Ionesco wrote The Rhinoceros before Invasion of the Body Snatchers. But no, the Invasion of the Body Snatchers comes out 3 years before Ionesco's Rhinoceros is first published and performed in Paris, much less the United States.
Wow.
Yeah, that's like amazing. And for those of you that don't know, the Rhinoceros is basically Invasion of the Body Snatchers meets Theater of the Absurd. Instead of everybody turning into pod people, everybody literally turns into a rhinoceros. And the actor who first portrayed the mayor in the Rhinoceros was Zero Mostel of the early producers, you know, the original producers. He won the Tony Award, and yes, Zero Mostel was on the blacklist.
Wow.
Yeah. So there's kind of a 6 degrees of Kevin Bacon.
Yeah.
I'm not sure how this couldn't be McCarthyism at all, considering that the lead role, his name is Kevin McCarthy. There's huge hints of this is McCarthyism.
He is representing McCarthy. Yeah, I'm with you. Like that, you know, just him screaming about the pod people. Definitely felt that way.
That's the same thing McCarthy did.
Exactly. So for our our book club that we have going on with the Back to the 1950s.
And they call the FBI.
They do, yes.
They don't call the police. They don't
No.
call the army. They
No.
call the FBI. They call J. Edgar Hoover.
That is
right.
very yes.
And some of the other places that they're going to ship the pods have like thinly veiled.
Interesting.
Like, we're going to send it to Crescent, as in like the sickle.
Oh, I didn't
We're
even.
going to send it to Red Bank next. That kind of thing.
Interesting. Yeah.
Yeah.
I had a couple of notes in my notes. It was like, why aren't they calling like the cops or anyone? No, they're just gonna go straight to like the governor.
Office.
You gotta hook up to the. What is this
No,
world
they're
where
going
I could
straight to the and the fact that people in a little suburban Gothic town know the number for the FBI.
Yes. Yeah. Oh yeah. I'm just gonna.
This is like the PSA to turn in your neighbors.
It's true.
You suspect your neighbor of being a pod person. Call J. Edgar Hoover.
I thought everyone had the number to the FBI. I do.
Yeah. Just.
Well, if it's true, if you see something, say something, or in this case, run through the street screaming something if you see something.
So
you're gonna be one of them.
To be fair, I think he had he was going to call a friend who had like he had a connection to the FBI.
He had a friend, yeah.
Calling J. Edgar himself.
I think it would have been great if J. Edgar Hoover had shown up in this movie.
So it's
kind
fun.
of like
a woman's dress and
14th
everything.
And Tartuffe, he just comes in
Yes.
at the end and just snaps his fingers and everything's okay. Yeah.
Eventually they'll remake this and set it in the 1950s, and that'll probably happen. Like.
So Anthony Hopkins has to survive just long
until...
enough to come in as J.
Got some fava beans and some Chianti.
Bob Hoskins is no longer with us. We're running out of old, short, fat actors to make this a reality.
I'm sorry, Mr. Huddleston. What is your first name and where are you? I need to call Mr. Hoover. You know too much. You know way too much.
The other thing I was going to ask, not related to the Red Scare, but since we're separated from this movie for like 65 years, what do you think the most enduring either narrative legacy or maybe political legacy of this film is?
That's the concept of pod people themselves, right?
Yeah. Pod people has become a part
that became a trope.
The nomenclature, I was trying to think of movies, television shows that use the concept of the pod person. The best one that I thought of was maybe the Borg in Star Trek.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Okay, yeah.
Because they had that notion of once you become assimilated, all you have is euphoria, right? It's the brain slug from Futurama. Yeah.
It absolutely is.
Yeah. Yeah, I made a note about, the pod people and how that has come to represent something like somewhat different than, it's more a technology, I feel like, dig nowadays than like obviously communism. But yeah, I think that definitely is what has lived on.
That's
I feel like there's a
Apple.
Yeah.
I feel like nowadays you would just instead of remaking this movie now you would just do it as a Black Mirror episode.
Yes. Yeah.
People would turn into literal sheeple.
Yes.
They'd be like half sheep and half
Yep. You're right.
Yeah. Oh my gosh.
We're gonna make this.
Yeah.
This will be one of our programs in the future.
Yeah. Probably one.
And the Insane Clown Posse and J. Edgar Hoover just come in at the end and right all wrongs.
Oh man.
Instead of pod people, they'll probably do like an iPhone or something like that.
Yes.
Oh my goodness.
You'd like.
Come and buy our Apple products.
iPods.
There's no headphone jack. You just have the AirPods.
Speaking of those pods, there was a lot of skin for 1956.
There was a lot of skin.
Yeah, like the censors originally were like, you got to add bubbles to that. We got to get Lawrence Welk in here to come in and add a little taste into
I'd like to
Cora.
know who got volunteered for that job.
To Dana Winters.
Bubbles
So
on.
my understanding is if you see an unclothed body in this, you're seeing a plastic mannequin.
Oh, interesting.
Like, all the actors had to be submerged into this goop. All they could have was like a straw to breathe with for a couple hours. Dana Winter, who played Becky, is incredibly claustrophobic. She had an interview where she said, like, the scariest moment in my life is when I was slowly solidifying in this plastic goop. Somebody knocked on my head and said, "We're going to lunch. We'll be back in an hour or two."
Oh no! As someone who's claustrophobic, that sounds terrible.
Yeah. And if you're the actor, do you get to keep your own pod person?
Yeah.
Or
I wonder if those
you're
are
if you're like Kevin McCarthy and Dana Winter, like, hey, let's trade.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and we were talking earlier that Dana Winters, the director, put her pod person like on her front step, like as a prank, like just moving them around.
I really hope those aren't in somebody's attic now.
No.
Like, apparently the pods themselves are like made out of paper mache or something like that.
Oh, interesting.
They probably didn't last.
No, probably not.
If they were, on the Cheech and Chong, movies. I was waiting for like Cheech and Chong to come out and start lighting one up.
They wind up in like a Fruit of the Loom ad 30 years later. Hey, is that Jack's pod?
Oh man.
Still got bubbles in this.
Wow, Kevin McCarthy looks really young in this. Oh, look at that underwear.
So Kevin McCarthy does have a cameo in the 1978 version. He is running through the street again, screaming that they're here to watch out. So that was fun because we.
Do you think in the Invasion of the Body Snatchers cinematic universe,
is it
do
still
they
Jack?
just presume that Kevin McCarthy is the Forrest Gump of the invasion, and he's just kept running?
He's just been running
all this time.
I like to think
years.
that he's been running around because, he's been running all over California for 32 years, yelling about pod people.
Yeah. And nobody believes him.
He made it from.
To be fair, he shouldn't have done it in California.
So
maybe
he makes it from like Red Bank or wherever it is in the first one all the way to San Francisco.
That's a slow running speed. Let's like.
Hey, he doesn't have very long strides.
It's true.
Let's be fair to the vertically challenged.
Yeah.
He's actually stopped yelling about pod people, and he told people not to go watch Piranha.
I got distracted. I'm hearing, I think, my cat meow from Ross's computer.
I'm very sorry.
It's okay.
It can't be helped.
So we talked a little about costumes, but we do have some 1950s dresses up here at the museum exhibit, back to the 1950s. Let's get a little closer. Definitely not as much skin as Becky's dress, so no. So one thing that I noticed, partially because we watched both of them back to back, but originally this movie was supposed to end on a less hopeful note. So the way this movie ends is Kevin McCarthy's character is in the hospital. Basically he's been collected because people think he's unwell, and so he's talking to psychiatrists. Yes, and at first nobody believes him, and Ross pointed out that if it had been a Twilight Zone episode, it would have ended where nobody believes him that he's telling the truth. But the way this one ends is that someone comes in and hears his story and believes the truth, or believes that the pod people are taking over. In Originally the film, they wanted to end it with Kevin McCarthy's character seeing truckloads of the pods leave Santa Mira, leave the town that he's in, and just kind of, I think, zoom in on his face, like looking on hopelessly. But the studio insisted on changing it because this is, the studios do things like that, especially in the 50s. How do you think this would change the film and kind of your perception of it, or would it?
Well, Rhinoceros does end that way. The
Yes.
play that's written 3 years later. The Kevin McCarthy surrogate is just standing in a herd of rhinos that are about to turn him into rhino. I would think virtually every version of this story subsequent to this has
ends like that. Yes. So the 70s, the 70s version has like that bleak, they've turned Donald Sutherland. He does that scream. And I wondered about like what, I didn't look into it. Maybe you know, Barrett, not to put you on the spot, but do you know how the book ends, the novel? Is it?
The book ends in that way, that he's going to go out and fight, but nobody is believing him.
Nobody's believing him, yeah. So I wonder, like, why they wanted to change that, if they just didn't think that people could.
So the Hays Code says that you can't mention divorce, you can't have overt sexual innuendo. We can talk about that in a second. A criminal cannot go unpunished in a film.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, and evil has to be vanquished.
Interesting.
So then in that scenario, you can't have the pod people win, right?
Yeah.
Not only do we have to say we're going to Reno, but then, so it's okay to kill Becky, kind of.
Yeah, we can.
And a small child.
Yes, and a small child who is
but
essentially murdered by his parents.
Yeah, evil has to be vanquished. Everybody else got it right since then, up and including even like Soylent Green, right?
Yeah.
Like Soylent Green and Invasion of the Body Snatchers basically have the same ending.
Yes.
But there's no resolution for Charlton Heston, whereas Kevin McCarthy is gonna go sleep. They're gonna
watch him.
And J. Edgar Hoover is gonna come in.
He's gonna help them all.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's interesting.
The Hays Code and with divorce, I seem to remember thinking like, yeah, I don't think divorce is probably cool in movies in the 50s, right? But
no.
Both the main character and his lady friend are divorced.
Because, polygamy was okay. There's one of the few films that's directed by a woman in the 50s is about it's called A Polygamist. Way
to be upfront about it.
Yeah. Well, you don't want to soft sell that.
Well,
I don't remember. Did they explicitly say that both the doctor and his lady friend were divorced? Because they heavily implied it.
They didn't say. I don't think they said divorce.
No, they used dog whistle language. They said
right
to Reno, and going to Reno is code for I went somewhere to get a quickie divorce.
Yeah.
Right. Okay.
And I know
that makes more sense.
Bennell said something, or Kevin McCarthy's character said something along the lines of like, oh, maybe if I'd been home more, my marriage would have worked out. So, it's clear that they were divorced, but yeah, it was interesting. So I didn't pick up that they.
You don't say the D word.
Yeah.
Can't say the D word.
And also, you can heavily imply some sexual innuendo.
Oh my goodness.
Can't do anything too explicit.
Like going all the way back to the 19th century, lots of plays used the kitchen for innuendo, right? And they took every page out of that playbook in the breakfast scene in here, right? Like, oh, do you like your eggs hard, or do you like it, like maybe if I'd have cooked something this good, my husband would stay, and maybe if I'd have come home to this, I'd have, that kind of thing. Oh my goodness.
Oh man. And they hadn't seen each other in what, 20 years?
5 years.
5, okay, 5.
5 years.
That's good. It wasn't as bad as I thought.
Yeah. 5 years. She's been gone, and he stayed or whatever. Yeah. But
All
they're
right.
both like apparently working on themselves because they
Yeah.
both look great.
Yeah,
Yeah.
no, they're
They-
committed.
Yeah.
You know, until she until she does not do so hot at the end.
Yeah. 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 To be fair, she was on a heavy B12 diet. That's how she got that waist. And she had not had a B12 injection in minutes before they went into that mine. So she was playing with a handicap.
Yeah. Right. Was there anything else that anyone wanted to talk about this movie?
Just a shout out to Kevin McCarthy, probably the direct link from Oklahoma. Well, he's dead.
Oh, yeah.
He died in 2000. He was 96 when he died, so it's not a bad thing.
Yeah.
But he was, of course, in the film UHF, which was shot in Tulsa, Oklahoma.
Oh,
so
yes.
if you want to see Kevin McCarthy and something a little bit more Oklahoma local, he's the bad guy. And
When I first saw him pop up in the movie, I was like, "Oh, that guy. Where do I know him from?" And I racked my brain. I was like, "Where do I know him from?" I feel like I've seen him like be the bad guy in many an '80s movie, and then
Inner Space.
UHF!
Yeah, like a
UHF!
very accomplished actor. Studio actor.
He's great.
He played Trigorin from The Three Sisters on Broadway, but no, UHF. Yeah.
Classic.
Yeah.
Stephanie, your background is great. I love it. Perfect. All right.
It took me a second to figure out how to do it, but
it looks great.
Yeah.
I was like, oh, that's funny.
The audacity of this pod. That's what
That's right.
That's what her face is.
Yeah.
How dare you?
The audacity of this pod.
Yeah.
All right.
Well, also, cheap plug, because we will be here a week from today, folks, and a week from Sunday, the Radio Drama Theater is going to be putting on a live performance of Flash Gordon.
Yes.
In the 1950s.
Oh, okay.
If I was smarter, I would have had the link pulled up, but let's do it. I'll get it. And next week we'll be talking about House on Haunted Hill with Vincent Price. So, and that one is available. So it is, it's available on Hoopla, which is a streaming site that you have access to if you have a Metro Library card, or I think it's an Amazon Prime movie, so it's free to rent. So yeah,
Fun fact: that one's a public domain movie, and if you go to Wikipedia, you can watch the movie embedded in Wikipedia.
It's fascinating.
Yeah.
Oh wait, so this is the link if you're interested in the Flash Gordon radio performance. You can register here to get the Zoom code. It's also free. And then next week, it's actually just going to be the same Zoom code you used tonight, but we'll put it up again. So any parting comments from anyone about Invasion of the Body Snatchers before we wrap up?
They're coming for you.
I wish I had you on like full screen when you said that, Barrett, so I could end with that. All right. Well, thank you so much for being here tonight, everyone. Thank you to our panelists, David and Clay, Carol and Barrett Huddleston for talking about the movie. They'll be back next week and me. And can't wait to see you then.
We'll see you in Reno, folks.
Let's stay out of this one. I'm gonna stay out of this one.
I'll bring Cheech and Chong with me too.
And J. Edgar Hoover.
Along with the pods.
Yeah,
and the insane clown posse.
Oh man. On that note.